today, I'd like you to think about how you're engaged or interact with your business. So just take a moment and think about that. So are you one who identifies with change, or are you kind of enjoy kind of tolerating that risk? Are you to kind of thrive on that risk? Or are you more risk adverse and change kind of creates that stress for you? Maybe you're, maybe you love to do research and dealing with data and collecting information. Or maybe it's systems that really kind of floats your boats and get you excited every day about what you're doing. You know, do you like to organize, create systems, procedures, and structure? So while you're thinking about that, the question to ask is, how am I motivated to take action in my business? So knowing how you are wired can help you better leverage your strengths and successfully scale your business. But before we get into some details around kind of knowing how you're wired, we're gonna welcome our panelists here today. And today we have Heather Nunley. She's the founder and CEO of Culture Fuel Group. And Heather works with business leaders to elevate accountability and advance top talent. Heather's dedicated to creating workplaces that are more innovative, focused, engaged, and she's very passionate about helping leaders intentionally manage culture. And then by doing that, you know, improve their results, better retain employees, and deliver greater customer satisfaction. So Heather, it's great to have you here today. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
All right. So a little bit warmer in your neck of the woods, right?
Yeah, I think so.
And then we have Robb Breding. He's the founder and coach of Rev Advisory Group. And Robb works with growth-minded business leaders, and he uses an approach focused on people with a philosophy-driven kind of by improving implementation and accelerating results. And Robb's love for people, business, and leadership development are kind of at the heart of everything he does. So Robb, it's good to have you here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Alan.
And then we have Dave Priddy. And Dave is the president and founder of DK Sales Consulting. Dave's been leading and coaching and training sales organizations for more than 20 years and has a passion to maximize people's talents and their potential. And when Dave's working with his clients, he teaches them to understand why customers make decisions in less than 90 seconds. So Dave, it's great to have you today as well.
Good to be here. Looking forward to it.
Okay, so why is it so important to know how you are wired? Not everyone thinks about that when they're starting their business, but in a way, it's to better understand kind of like your DNA that's inside of you, so you can get more clarity and personal insights to set your business and your team and yourself up for greater success. And this is interesting because when you break it down, when you break everything down, all these assessments are different ways to learn about different personality types. There are two types of entrepreneurs, two types of individuals, and they're starters. So people who love to begin new things and are high idea generators, quick to move from one project to the next and may not be wired to finish things. That's kind of like me. So I drive people nuts sometimes. But we also get distracted a lot. You know, starters are more motivated by generating new ideas than seeing them through to completion. So then kind of the flip side of that, we also have what is known as the finisher. They're geared to finish rather than to do quick starts. They like to do lists and are more organized and love to use numbers and data. And finishers are not always motivated or excited about new ideas, but they are motivated to complete things. And now these are just two extremes or two ways of doing things. There's no right way or wrong way, but a successful business needs both starters and finishers. The important thing is knowing how your team and you are wired so that you can align people with their strengths and be set up for success, kind of get the right people working together. And to be successful as you possibly can be, you'll only get results from great ideas if you finish and implement them. So the two need to go together. So with that, I am going to kind of ask Robb here, when did you discover how you are wired? And can you share kind of how not knowing impacted your life? And if you had a business then, how it impacted your business?
Sure. Thanks, Alan. I'll get started. Yeah, this is a good question. I think I've always been kind of interested in this topic, just even when I was very young. And I think, when I was a kid, I think I mentioned this maybe even on one of these other ones that we did together, Alan, that, I had kind of a troubled youth. And so I was introduced to psychologists kind of early in my life, not because I was crazy, but because I like to get in trouble. And so when I started out, with things, I remember the first iteration of Robb was, I had gotten into some trouble when I was young, but I decided to, get my head screwed on. And then when I started off in my career at college, I decided I wanted to be a youth pastor. And so a lot of the classwork there, was studying people and kids, and then switched to psychology, where we continue to learn about people. And so, when did I discover how I was wired? I think, it starts out kind of with a, like you kind of fall into it, right? Like you start to realize what you're good at, and people start telling you, and the mirror starts to get held up in front of you. And then as you get older, maybe it becomes more intentional. So Sears was my first corporate job. I worked there 11 years. I was going to be the CEO, but then I left. And Sears used to be a great company back when I worked there. It's pretty much gone now.
Yeah.
And they had great training programs. And so those started to, educate me even more. And then you asked the question about business. Well, I started Shock City Cellular, which is a wireless phone company that I owned. And we had lots of employees over time. And we would, we would use these types of, use assessments and different things. And again, I when I thought about this question, how has it impacted me? I think it's, you stumble through and you realize I'm good at this, I'm not good at that. I'm like this, I'm not like that. Oh, this is a skill that I can learn and mitigate this weakness that I might have. Or here's a strength. If I lean in here, I can be much more effective. And I think that that's kind of been my approach to this topic personally, since that's what the question was really about.
Yeah.
And I think I'll just leave it there, and we'll keep talking about it. But
all right. Well, I think the important thing you had sort of slipped in there is the first iteration of Robb. So I think that's an important thing to point out too, that you're always learning about yourself. It's not like you're pigeonholing yourself into one aspect of yourself. It's just, but you're just knowing more about you and how to.
And at first it happens by chance, right? You just fall into things. And then as this last iteration, the one that I'm on now, where I've got a consulting and coaching company, well, certainly it's very intentional, right? Because I'm talking to people about it every day. So I think with most of us, it evolves over time.
Yeah. Heather, I'd like to hear your perspective on this one. Hear how you kind of first tuned into all this.
Yeah, some similarity to what Robb said there, but I'll tell you, my first take at assessments was about 20 years ago is when I first discovered them. And that was when I was in a corporate career at the time. I was a human resources director in the retail and consumer products and goods industry, and also spent a little bit of time in hospitality as well. But it was a thing, and it still is. I find them quite effective even now as a business owner. However, at that point, the very first assessment that I took was the DISC profile, which I'm sure many have heard of here. But for me, it was just, there was so much validation there. Like I said, to Robb's point, it's like you kind of know how you operate, how you function, what you like, what you lean toward, move away from, and taking an assessment really helps to kind of validate, in most cases, what you already know about yourself. So that was really affirming for me, and I found it to be really useful in my interactions with other people as well. And I've been on an assessment journey, quite honestly, over the last 20 years. I find them quite fascinating. I've taken many, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But essentially, prior to understanding my wiring, I'm certain for a fact that I wasted time, that I wasted energy, resources, because with each assessment I've taken, I've been able to kind of better hone in on what it is that I really do best, and also how I connect to other people when I'm amongst a group or a team type of a situation. So I really think the assessments that are gained there can be critical. You really learn what your triggers are, and it helps you learn how to communicate and adapt in different environments and situations as far as business is concerned.
So do you find it kind of gives you a bit of an intelligence in terms of managing your way through groups of people and collaborating and just through different cultures?
I definitely agree with that. The other thing that I think comes to mind when I think about that is it kind of takes away any sensitivity around people pointing out different things about you when you really know who you are. And that's been, you know it, and then you kind of see it as on a result or on a profile from an assessment. And someone then points it out. Like you said, there are people who are starters and there are people that are finishers. And I can very easily joke around with people and as to where it is that I am versus taking anything so personal. I just understand my makeup and I'm okay with that.
Yeah, no, that's very good. Yeah, it's a very valid point. It just helps you really feel good about where you are and what you know you can do. So that's very important. Dave, I'd like to hear your perspective on this, how you kind of learned a little bit more about how you're wired.
Well, it's funny. It goes all the way back to high school. I remember taking the aptitude tests. It's like, oh, what should you do? And, should you go to college? Should you go into the trade? And I didn't even realize that until I started hearing this. I'm thinking back to when I first was looking at this, because I was thinking disc and all the other things, but I remember taking these questions and a lot of it was sort of like, no way. I mean, one of the top ones at that point was sales. So who knew? But it as far as not knowing, I think the danger there is that a lot of people around me, because I was good at some different things, they says, oh, you should go and do this, and some people with the best intentions, not knowing yourself, you can sometimes tend to listen to other people based on their limited knowledge of you that can maybe influence you to do. I mean, if you're not a starter, you probably shouldn't be too much on the entrepreneurial side unless you're working with someone who is. I mean, that's the other thing is, I think that's the other piece, that what's missing is maybe you can find that missing piece by partnering with others. So that's kind of what was my lessons learned. Because when I first started, it wasn't business. It was just like, okay, how do I finish this last class and go out and have some fun and not getting too much trouble for being home late.
Yeah. So you didn't start taking assessments because you were a troublemaker like Robb.
Not that I'm admitting.
Okay. So now you've all talked about different assessments that you've taken, and you kind of have a sense of how you're wired. Now I know from what you've all said, some of you have taken tons of assessments, and maybe some of you not as many. Now, I don't want you to go and list all of them, otherwise we'll be here all day. But there may be some overlaps here as well. So I'm going to start with I'm going to start with Heather, and I'm going to ask you to kind of give us a sense of kind of some of the assessments that you've taken and how that helped you learn a little bit more about how you're wired. And then if Dave or Robb, if you wanted to say the same assessment, maybe don't go in as much detail, but maybe hit on another one that maybe really helped you out as well. And so Heather, we'll start with you, and you can kind of let us know kind of which one or two assessments really kind of helped you a lot or stood out the most to you.
Okay, yeah, well, as I had mentioned, I probably would be one with a long list, and I don't think that that's suitable to display here, not necessary at all. But I think in terms of me figuring out how it was that I was wired, one thing as I kind of spoke to is I just felt like it really increased my self-awareness in general. Also, it impacted my professional development. I think helping to kind of guide me in terms of choices that I would make. Like Dave said, there's certain people that, maybe would point you in one direction, but, you become more self-aware as a result of taking some of these assessments, and it shifts you into a different direction. And just overall, I really do believe that it helps to increase effectiveness. And what I mean by that is I use the assessments in the work that I do with clients, and it's usually we're starting at a set point and then we're looking to get to a certain place. But with that said, the one that I use quite a bit in my work, and I've taken it myself personally, it's called the 360 Reach Assessment. So many of you have likely heard of 360 assessments. This one is a little different from your typical 360. It answers the question, what do people think about me? And it basically measures reputation. So it helps you understand your own brand from the inside out. And I've also used it with teams as well. So we can do a consolidate assessment where we look at what does a team brand look like overall and how it is that they show up. Because perception matters, right, at the end of the day. And usually I'll utilize that when I'm doing some strategic work with clients that are related to brand. Another one, well, I'll say two more that I use quite a bit, even when it comes to hiring, or even if I'm hiring an outside consultant to work with me. And those you're likely all familiar with too, but the Strengths Finder and the Colby A assessment are two that I utilize quite a bit. And talk about saving money in terms of time and resources. That Colby assessment specifically, basically that answers how do you naturally and instinctively take action. And I found that useful when hiring new team members to kind of see how this person might fit on the team. And as far as the Strength Finder, you mentioned it earlier, Alan, that one measures the DNA of your talent overall. So what are your real strengths to help you line up your unique brilliance as it relates to your workload and the specific projects and tasks that you might take on. So those are three that I use pretty frequently, and I tailor them depending upon the client work that I'm doing.
Yeah, I like kind of the blend of what you have there, because instead of getting frustrated with, why can't I do this? Or, just lowering your self-esteem. And it's like, well, that's not how I'm wired. I love doing this, so I'm just going to keep pursuing that and following that. And I do it well and I enjoy it. And it fits with me. And yeah, I can see how that would just keep your energy level a little higher. And not only that, save you time from going down the wrong path, possibly, and forcing yourself into an area where you think you should be because everyone tells you should be there, when in reality, you know yourself better and what feels right for you. So I like that. Yeah. So, all right. Well, Dave, I'd like to hear a little bit about your sorted past here and kind of all the different assessments you went through.
Well, I started listing all of the ones that I've taken, and you're right. We'd fill the rest of the hour with all the listings, and even just with one or two pieces of it. It's interesting you mentioned the 360 degree, 360 degree reach. I did that a couple times at J&J, and I forgot. I just thought it was 360 degree feedback, and it's sort of like, oh, that's what it was called. But I think the thing that validates a lot of them for me is that they're all very similar. That my outcomes on it was very, very similar. Now they might have put me in a slightly different box and things like that, but they all seemed to be agreeing when I filled out the questions and everything, that it was all very similar. And I think one of the biggest dangers of these is being put into a box, to being pigeonholed. It's like, oh, I know what you are now, so I don't need to think anymore. I just need to say, okay, I know you're this, so I don't have to do anything different. And I know that's what a lot of people have a concern about when it comes to that. Because again, you're trying to figure people out, and it depends on why you're trying to figure them out. I think that's the other thing, is you've got to come from that, okay, hey, the reason I want to figure out is so that we can have a good communication, that we can work together and make it so that we're moving in the same direction. And sometimes it's saying, hey, we're not going in the same direction, so find out more quickly. Okay, no harm, no foul. Or I got someone who you should maybe talk to who would be a better fit to work with you. So it's the one that I use more often than not is BANK. That's the Blueprint Action Nurture Knowledge, and it seems to fit more into the sales side. I've used DISC. Again, all the others, and they all, I think, have a certain amount of value in different ways. You know, Disc and Myers-Briggs seem to be more focused on the HR side, but they all have bring value. And I think the first value is understanding yourself, because if you're going to try and do any kind of flexing and meet to someone else, you got to know yourself so that you're not going to naturally get unnatural. So I think that's the first step, and it's a matter of understanding yourself and then being willing to make some flexing. You know, before I got too involved in these, when I first started out in sales, I talked to my reps about reading the walls. You go in and look at the walls, and now I mean with bank, I know that, okay, if it's covered with I love me's and awards and everything, they're actions. If they have 10,000 questions in the first 17 seconds, they're probably more knowledge. So I had reps who were doing that categorization to understand they should communicate with them. Now it's just, there's different tools that you can utilize to help identify that more quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the breadth of tools does help you kind of learn about how it all works. And pigeonholing, I think, yes, definitely have to be very careful with that. But it's more or less to kind of open your mind around all of these things, and maybe to be more observant while you're out there, and to be more cognizant or conscious and aware of others rather than pigeonholing them. So it's just maybe slowing you down a bit to be aware of cues when you walk in the room, to pay attention to people so that you can communicate better and learn from one another.
Well, it's the same idea of, are you listening to respond or are you listening to understand? And that's the whole concept, I think, with these, is if you're listening, if you're doing these to facilitate, to help people understand who they are and then have that communication, because I want people to know I want, that NAKB after mine, I want them to know that, so that when we have that communication, I flex for them, but then they flex for me. So all of a sudden it's a much better communication tool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Rob, I'd like to kind of hear a little bit about you. Kind of what were the ones that kind of rose to the top for you?
Well, I'm going to take a little bit. So Heather and Dave obviously have said a lot about like the utilization of the different tools. And so in my coaching, we're using a lot of this stuff. So we do basically two things for coaching executives up in helping them to achieve or get to accelerate their development, get some transformation quickly. And then I also work with assessments in helping select. So when you're hiring, being able to kind of look at a role and say, here's some of the behavioral characteristics or some of the drivers that we're going to be looking for. So for me, I've used all kinds of different ones, just like everybody else over the years. And so what I've landed on is that there's really three kind of parts to us that we need to look at. And the first one is the thing that we've been talking about, and that is our natural talents or our natural abilities and our behavior, which really for me break down into two things: our behavioral style and our values and driving forces. And so we have an assessment for behavioral style where we're using a DISC assessment, which I think is the most easily understood, and it's also the most highly validated assessment tool out there. So if you want to get underneath behavior, I think that's the one. And then the company that we work with, TTI Insights, has a driving forces or a motivators or a values assessment that we're using. And they combine those two to really get at what they're calling a talent insights assessment. And to me, sometimes the assessment itself isn't the magic, it's the reporting. And so the reporting that you get from some of these companies can vary. And so I know that some people are tuning in to kind of get some ideas about assessments to use. And that particular one, when it comes to foundationally who we are, is really, really good. And then I just want to add to the other this, that there's two other things. There's soft skill competencies that we need to be able to measure. And there's hard skill competencies that we need to be able to measure. Those are different, where our talents and our abilities are really very fixed. These things are skills that we can develop, right? And we can kind of lean into our strengths to it. And so we use several different devices there to measure, emotional intelligence. We also measure around 25 different soft skills, or what we call competencies, from communication to interpersonal skills. And so those are some of the devices that I'm using in my coaching now. And man, since I have, immersed myself in this, it's been really helpful. because now I'm not wasting time honing skills that aren't going to impact my work on a daily basis or where I'm trying to go, but I'm working on things that I know I need to improve or I need to get better at, and then I'm leaning into those talents that are more fixed and like Heather and David have been discussing. So that's my take on it. Definitely very passionate about the tools that I'm using now. So I really love these tools.
Sure.
So kind of a multi-science approach, Alan, that's what I say. So.
Yeah. And you know, everyone is unique, and we don't want to take away that uniqueness of the individual. I mean, that's all a big part of this. And sometimes those uniquenesses, the attributes can be very complex. So this is a way to help you understand yourself better and maybe to observe and see similar things in other people. And it's not the label, it's not the pigeonhole. It's more or less just helping us be more aware of the unique attributes that everyone has, so that we can embrace that and allow people to be who they are, and to better communicate and to learn how to work together. And for example, even if you take an assessment and you really want to be a doctor, but maybe the assessment says you'd be better off over here, there's nothing wrong with still taking a look at the doctor aspect and maybe pursuing that. But you're going into that though knowing that these are areas that I need to improve upon to become X type of doctor. So it just can kind of, like Heather was saying earlier, it can help you kind of focus your efforts so you're not wasting time in another area. It just gives you some guidance, and it's I guess that's what it is. It's a guidance tool to give you some insight, but it's not a be all to end all. And that's why you guys have done so many. Just kind of hone in on little areas or just validate things that you may be thinking already. So I wanted to go a little more on that because I didn't want people to think that we're saying that you have to do assessments so that you end up knowing exactly where you are, because that's not what it's about. It's about just understanding yourself better so that you can go and leverage that knowledge, leverage that information to grow. So once you know how you are wired, how has this helped you enjoy your business more and to be more successful? I know you've talked about efficiencies. I know you've talked about not wasting time in certain areas. So, but how has it helped you in terms of making your businesses more successful? And with that, I'd like to kind of start out with Dave.
I think the first thing is back to that better understanding myself. And it's, understanding no matter what you do, whether it's DISC, whether it's bank, whether it's MBTI, we're all made up of everything. I mean, it's not like, okay, I'm only a blueprint or I'm only a nurturer. It's there's all the different aspects of every part of that. So what it's helped me is understand, okay, why do I like things? Also, why do I maybe not like things, and how do I adjust to that? It also helps me identify, what's important to clients, and are they willing to flex? Because the people that are you can identify pretty quickly that are not willing to flex, I might be able to work with them if the things that they want that I'm looking to have flex aren't that important to me or to their success. But it also might help me identify. It's like, okay, not just walk away, but run away at top speed. So it's not necessarily that there's not someone who could help them. It might just not be me. So it's, that's why looking at it, the better I know people, both the clients that I'm working with, but also the other people in my universe, if you will, who can I recommend to some? I know a lot of people who are in financial planning. I know a lot of coaches. I know a lot of marketing, specialists. And I also know there's some people that I would never refer to other certain people. So that also helps me identify where I can help, either by participating or by not participating, but who to direct them to. So it's, I think the benefits, the biggest benefit is knowing myself. So, can I flex? Because sometimes it's fun flexing into something that I don't do that often, that is not necessarily one of my favorite things, but identifying someone who I really connect with for one reason or another, but then knowing that I can help them understand themselves better and help them accelerate things. So it may be more of a challenge, but then it gives me a chance to expand what I do and to grow in the things that I do. I mean, we talked a little bit earlier about it being a work in progress. Well, always a work in progress. And if you ever don't agree to that, I don't want to talk to you, because you're not going to be any fun, and you're not going to have any fun with the world, understanding that you need to react differently.
Yeah, I think you bring up some interesting things. Yes, you're getting a lot of I guess knowledge around all these things, so you got a lot in your mind, but you also have to remember that you still got your gut, and there's nothing wrong with listening to your gut along with the knowledge that you have. So if it just doesn't feel right, but maybe it still looks good on paper or in your mind based on what you've been learning, you still got to listen to that gut. And if it just doesn't seem right, then go with your gut. It's
well, and sometimes the better you understand yourself and the better you understand others, it gives you more explanation for the gut. It's sort of like, okay, maybe there was, in the past it was gut, but now I'm going to say, oh yeah, you know what? Back then, the reason the gut was telling me either run away or jump in was because of a lot of information I've learned since then. So good point.
Yeah. I'm also going to point out, so people aren't worried, because we were talking about a bunch of different assessments before. We're going to list those all in the follow-up recording of this. So we'll have a listing of all the different assessments that you guys have done, so people can at least get a sense of what's out there. So we're gonna have that stuff posted there. So we're not gonna lose kind of what we're talking about here in terms of the different assessments. All right, so I just wanted to mention that real quick. And then Robb, I kind of would like to hear your perspective on this here in terms of how it's, kind of helped you enjoy your business more, helped you be more successful.
For most of my career, I've had the fortune of being able to kind of, decide what I'm doing, right? Like, so I had a business that I owned. Now I have a consulting practice that I've owned, and so I don't really have a lot of people telling me what to do. So this is really important to me, right? Like, that I do understand myself, because whether I like it or not, I'm still going to have to do and accomplish things that maybe I'm not really good at, right? And I don't have an integrator, right? Right now it's just Robb. In the past, when I had, surrounded myself with a lot of people, lots of employees, you want to fill those gaps. So I think, first of all, to answer your question, how knowing how I'm wired, does that help me to be better? I mean, I'm just plain more effective. I know what I'm good at. I know what I'm not good at. I know when I need to reach out for help, to get some help from somebody. Another thing is knowing the difference between what a natural talent is and what a skill is. Like I was saying before, those soft and hard skills, being able to parse that out. It's really helped me to say, okay, wait a minute. No, that's just who Robb is. Okay. I'm not going to try to change that. Okay. I'm just going to bang my head against the wall if I do that. But over here, this is a real skill that I could work on, like time management or whatever it is, that I could add to that to kind of mitigate some of my natural kind of tendencies. Right. And so I think that to me has been, and I think soft skills, and I'm sure Heather would agree with me, and Dave too, because that's a work we do, are just so underappreciated, and because they're harder to understand than a hard skill, right? Like the idea of a technical skill. I mean, I'm going to be a doctor. I got to learn how to, do this or that. I got to learn chemistry. I got to learn all these kind of facts and figures, and I got to gain some experience. But on the soft side, I believe that these assessment tools that we're talking about, and specifically the skills assessment tools, will give us a framework to build people up in the way that they need to be built up. And I'm telling you, the cultural difference that people that have high soft skill competency in a company, the difference that can make. I mean, if you listen to Patrick Lencioni, those are the companies that are going to win in the future, because, it's just such a differentiator when we know ourselves and we can function well together interpersonally. And I think that's what these assessment tools have done for me. They've just made me better at that.
Yeah. You had mentioned EOS in what you're talking about here. Now, for those of you who don't know, EOS stands for Entrepreneurial Operating System, and it comes from a book called Traction. And in there, they kind of break kind of into two categories. There's the visionary and there's the integrator. And you had mentioned the integrator. And kind of how I fit in with that is I was kind of playing both roles unbeknownst to me. And so I'd always be running my business, hitting a ceiling and just keep fluttering out there and could never get my business past a certain point. And I would end up just being frustrated with it and exhausted and feeling no love and just, underloved, underpaid, all that stuff. And then it ends up kind of tanking because I'm burning out over my business. And I did that a few times. And lo and behold, I get this book traction, and then learning a little bit more about it, getting the right people in the right seats. I learned a little bit about Colbier and Strengths Finders from Fabienne from Bold Heart. So that was very beneficial for me. And then just learned through the book traction that there's the visionary and the integrator. And oh my goodness, I'm more the visionary. I'm not, more the starter guy and not the finisher guy. And so that's why I kept crashing with my business and was frustrated with it all the time, because I had this shiny object syndrome, always going over here and never finishing things. So in order to have a successful business, you have to finish things. So again, where I was going with that is EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System, the book traction. That's another good way to look at your business. It also gives you systems to put into place. So if you're not a real good systems person, if you're more visionary, it gives you a good idea as to how to start mapping out, laying out the groundwork for your business. But also if you're more integrator, it gives you nice kind of processes to follow around that as well. And then it just helps you understand how the integrator and the visionary work together to make a very strong business. So anyway, a little sidebar there around EOS. But Heather, I'd like to kind of hear knowing how you are wired, how that has helped you enjoy your business more and to become more successful.
Yeah, I'm going to add just a bit to your sidebar, and then I'm going to respond. But I would say, since you brought up the EOS system, that was really enlightening for me, learning about the book traction and what knowledge you really gain from taking that assessment. And another reason that I like it is that it doesn't need to be administered by, a coach or a consultant like Rob or Dave or I. You literally read the book, you do a self-assessment, and you got your results, and you can really learn a lot. So just wanted to say I would give that one a thumbs up as well. And as it relates to how me being wired has helped the success of my business, I like to think of the way that I can use assessments in 3 different ways. One is I can utilize it in an initial phase, usually when I'm working with I do work with solo business owners, but I also work with teams as well. And usually when I'm doing work with a team, it requires an initial discovery phase where I might do an assessment, utilize an assessment tool to kind of see where do we stand right now. And then it might take me down the line to actually in a development phase with a client where we might take a specific assessment based on the needs of that team. And then closing out an engagement with a client might mean in some cases me doing another assessment just so we can measure ROI, the return on the investment that they've made with us. Okay, these were your results when we started, 12 months ago, and now here we are 12 months later, and this is a view of what the team might look like. And where that really played itself out, where, for me, I'll give you one example anyway. I did some work with a franchise group. Many of you have likely heard of Massage Envy franchises. Well, they're a huge company, but then they work individually. These franchisees buy one. Well, it was a franchisee that owned 2 and were looking to open more. So I ended up working with them when they had 2 franchises. We did an initial assessment. I ended up putting together a development program for their leadership team. What they wanted to do was they wanted to unify their franchise brand in these new locations that they were going to open. So you've got, obviously, Massage Envy is very distinct, but then when you're working with individual owners, it kind of takes on its own culture, within the franchise. So they really wanted to make sure that carried out with their expansion. And with the development of the leadership plan at the end is when I did go back and we did another assessment, same assessment, but we took a look at it was an attitudinal assessment, you know, the attitude of the team over a period of time, where there were some pretty significant growth, and they were so happy to see it. And, you know, with businesses, you know, sometimes we want to see that data, you know, to be, it's not, you know, Heather, the coach, you know, giving an opinion about something, but it's more objective and, you know, providing some data for the information to really be grounded in. So taking the findings from those assessments and utilizing that to focus on specific areas can really, really be beneficial. And in my case, in that particular case, help to carry out a project that, you know, started off as something really small, but, you know, the client then wanted to engage and learn and know more and, you know, really build upon that. So.
Yeah, I liked what you were saying about, you know, the data part of it. You know, you have kind of like the discovery, development, and then you've got the measure. And I think the measurement of it is very important, because that goes along with everything that we're talking about here, because, you know, you take an assessment, measure, it's always a constant evolution, ebbing and flowing, because you're always getting new indicators, new things coming in, impacting a team or an individual. And based on where you are with everything, you may respond differently or one way or another. So by doing some assessments periodically, you're now taking all these new things you've learned and okay, so now where have I grown to? And also what I like about it in terms of the team, oftentimes there isn't a lot of revealing of how someone's feeling inside. And so it sounds like through some of these team assessments, in terms of the culture, that kind of gets pulled out a little bit, and then you can kind of see where your team as a culture stands, your team as a perception stands, your team as a productive entity together. How well is it doing? Sounds like the assessments can kind of pull out some of the things that normally aren't shared verbally, or maybe shared verbally, but might be misunderstood. Is that kind of what I was hearing too with a team? It can kind of help you better understand the dynamics of your team and how healthy it is.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And like I said, I think it's that, you know, people looking at themselves against a cumulative group of people in general sometimes lands differently than their manager or their leader saying, this is what you need to work on, when they can kind of, you know, compare and contrast. Not that the assessments are meant to kind of compare yourself to other people, but I do, like I said earlier, there is some validation in knowing, like, oh, okay, I am who I am, and this is what that looks like for me, that I think is useful for people to see that amongst, you know, a collective group.
Sure. All right. So, okay. So now with our understanding of what motivates people to take action, or at least have a better understanding of their strengths, how has this helped you find or engage and retain your teams as you're growing and building your business? And if maybe you guys are still kind of a smaller business, how does it help your clients attract and retain and engage the right people in the right seats? And with that, I have to get my order here of who, so I don't surprise you guys too much. I guess we're going to start with Heather on that one.
Yeah, I would say that I think when it comes to building and developing a team, the assessments really can be invaluable. And I say that in their use as a development tool, not necessarily as a performance tool per se. Yes, we utilize them in that way, but I think it really helps to understand, you know, development of where people are now and where it is that they want to be. Gives you a more closer view there. And I know in my case, I mentioned it earlier, but I don't do any hiring now without looking at a strengths finder or a Colby A assessment, because it really, really helps support putting the right people in the right seats on the bus, if you will. So I find that to be really, really useful in that way. And, you know, I'm a solo business owner. I work with other coaches and consultants if, you know, I bring on a larger client where I need some support. And even with that, you know, I'm conversing with other consultants like, okay, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? So it helps to balance out my own team as needed for larger, you know, more strategic projects and initiatives that I might engage in. So really
So so you kind of make it part of your hiring process then, once you've maybe whittled down your candidates and you got maybe your top 3 to 5, then you roll in the assessments. Is that how you usually do that?
Yeah, we do some and this is for actual hiring, pre-interviewing, and then we'll do an assessment. But like I said, when I'm looking to kind of partner with another consultant, it's more conversational. Us just kind of saying, okay, you know, what might you bring to the table that could help us deliver on what the client needs at any given point on a project.
Sure. Okay. Really
Yeah.
cool. All right. Robb, I'd like to hear kind of how you leverage this for your team building. Oh, we got you on mute there, Robb.
Sorry, I knew that was going to happen eventually. But
Yeah.
so at my company, you know, the company that I owned, where we had lots of employees and we did a lot of hiring, it was a retail company. And we had really good systems for doing hiring, right? Like we would have good systems for attracting candidates, and then we would have interview systems. And so now with the assessment devices that are out there, something that I didn't leverage back then, one of the things that I do now is I do help businesses with what we call a benchmark. So we're actually assessing a role, and we use stakeholders to do that. So if you had let's use my company as an example. At Shock City, we had general manager in every location. So we would benchmark that role from a behavioral, driving forces, the skills that it's going to ask you to bring to the table and to be successful. And so now to the interview process, to the resume and job description comparison, we can now add some objective data about how engaged is that person going to be with this work? Are they going to like it? Are they going to enjoy it? Or are they going to be naturally good at it? Do they bring some skills already developed that are going to be necessary, or are we going to have to develop them? I think Heather mentioned in terms of using it for development, we provide the actual target. You know what I mean? Sometimes we just take an assessment and we say, okay, well, here's where we're at. Well, where are we trying to go? And so by having the role assessed, which is something that I think, you know, I'm sure others are doing it out there, but I think that that's something, since I've been working with Robb Hiller, who's mentoring me through this, and where I've kind of gathered a lot of this information from and working with him, is that having that benchmark or that point to where we're aiming for when we're developing with an executive, it can be real helpful because it saves time and energy. And so I would say, I wish I was doing that when I owned my business, but now that's what I'm helping, you know, with. And so now, instead of just having the resume comparison to the job description and the interviews, I don't care how good you are at it, adding some objectivity with some of the science into the selection process is a really important thing. And it's got to be done right. And you can't use any instrument for that, by the way. In a hiring process, you have to use a SHRM approved, you know, it has to be validated and you know, so be careful out there, business owners, if you're listening, not to just pick up some assessment and use it. Myers-Briggs, for example, can't be used in the selection process. It's not a validated assessment. So anyway, that's my take on that. I think it's hugely important, Alan, and it can be a huge help in making sure you reduce turnover and increase engagement with your team.
Yeah, and I really like how you have it as help you gear everything toward a point of focus, you know, something that you're aiming toward. I like that. So, all right, Dave, I'd like to kind of hear your perspective on that.
Well, everything Heather and Robb just said. So I won't repeat all that.
Ditto.
But it's, you know, I was a hiring manager for 30 years. And one of the keys was looking for a diverse team. It would have been a lot easier if I had been utilizing a lot of these things, because you don't want to have, I mean, one of the dangers about a successful, especially a team leader or whatever, who's been really successful, their natural transition is, okay, I got to hire 10 of me. And then they'll hate themselves and their employees. So it's looking for that diversity. There's certain things you've got to match along the lines, but it's avoiding that sameness, because that's also not the way you're going to be successful, because you're not selling to the same exactly individuals either. So you can have that diversity of thought and diversity of trying to look at things from a different perspective and say, hey, this might work with that one because they're a lot different than you are. And talking about development, not only trying to identify what might be best for someone, and be careful saying, well, this would be best for you, because that's a good way to have them say just the opposite, even if it would be. But identifying what are some of the processes and how do you put them through? Like again, I'll use my bank, I'm going to treat a blueprints development a lot different than an action or a knowledge, and I'm going to look for those resources. I've tried to do that throughout my career, and the people who I've had the most success with, I've identified what's important to them and then given them the resources. But a lot of times it'll be, here are the resources, and I might guide them, here's 3 choices, but let them choose them. Let them decide not only what resources they're going to use, but how they're going to use them. I had one of the second person that I ever trained in J&J, he was dyslexic, and he says, the process was literally talking back and forth and helping him memorize everything else like that. He says, Dave, let me go spend 6 hours in my hotel room. Leave me alone. Literally the next day, he did more in those 6 hours than he had ever had, in the week or two beforehand. And it was because I said, okay, I'm going to trust you. And boy, I still keep in touch with him today as we have a good relationship, but it's understanding how people learn, but also what motivates them. You talked about benchmarks. Blueprint is going to be motivated by things different than an action, different than a knowledge, just different than a nurturer. So finding out what's important to them, not just assuming, but validating, hey, would this be something that would motivate you? And so, actions love the contests. Knowledge is, they just want to know everything and anything. So it's identifying what's important to them and trying to find the right rewards for the different personality types as well.
Sure. I guess to kind of even build on that more, you said that you kind of hire to kind of get the diversity, because you don't want to hire all the same people like you. It's the same way with clients. All your clients are not the same. So even understanding these assessments will help you better understand all your clients, so you can get the right people to work with the different diversity of clients that you have. So it even becomes even more instrumental there, just helping to get the right match with everything.
Like with disc, you've got, when I took, the last time I took it was 10 years ago, and my natural was like 86% dominance, but my adapted was 44% dominance. So depending on the situation, that number may vary. And that just same thing with bank. Someone might naturally be knowledge is my third, but that's also my stress code. So if I get under stress, boom, I need about 10,000 pieces of information, which will make my son happy, who's a knowledge, but it'll drive my daughter crazy, who's an action. So it's understanding, again, back to understanding yourself, but also understanding others, so that you can, again, meet their needs and be talking the platinum rule, treat others the way they want to be treated.
Yeah. All right, cool. Well, thank you, Ron. So what I'm going to do is I've got one question here that we can sneak in real quick from our attendees. And so I call them my ABQs, another burning question. So this one here is, I have a business partner and we're both wired as starters. We can't afford to hire a full-time finisher. What do you suggest? So that's a good question. I guess raise of hands who'd like to kind of answer that one. All right, Heather.
I'd be happy to respond, only because it has been my personal experience. So prior to me doing my consulting work, I worked in a family business with my husband. We owned a carpet cleaning and a water damage restoration company. In any event, we did the assessment, and I'm an anomaly. And Fabienne Fredrickson is actually who said that to me, because I'm equal parts starter as I am finisher, and it's rare. Well, my husband is an absolute starter, and he really needed a finisher. So what the conclusion that we came to was that we would make a decision. So I played the role of the finisher in that partnership. Even though I had the ability of a starter, it was important for me to scale back and, you know, really take on that finisher role, being that I had that ability to do that, and allow him to be the visionary and kind of take the lead in that role. So it really would likely boil down to a decision of, okay, who's gonna step forward and really be that, because it's really challenging to have two people lead at the same time. And I don't know if Dave or Rob might.
Well, I could add to what you're saying, Heather, too, in that I was in a partnership with my brother where we were both starters. And so when we started, it was just us, and, you know, we had one location that I ran, you know what I mean? And so it wasn't like we had, even though we had staff, we didn't have the ability to bring on somebody to integrate for us, which would be the EOS term, or to bring on somebody to help the finisher, right? And so one of the things about a starter, though, is that we do have really high Ds, Dave, okay? So we like to, we have a lot, you know, type A personality. I don't know however you want to say it, but so leaning into that to push through and not give up until you get to a place where you can start to bring some of that help on. And then, of course, developing some skills around that are going to be helpful, like time management, project management skills, those kinds of things that maybe can help you to get, you know you need it, but you can't afford to add it, right? Is kind of what I heard him saying. And I think that some of those things, if you can lean into some of our strengths, can help us to overcome. You know, Heather, I would love to have your personality in that way. You know, I mean, that kind of combination, I think that's really good. I'm really extreme one way person.
And wouldn't that be good? Just be right in the middle.
No, I'm not in the middle about anything.
I mean,
unfortunately.
I think that both Heather and Robert were talking about, you know, you've got to, you're almost finding where that resource is. And, you know, the way the question was asked, it sounded like it was more, there wasn't a hybrid. It was literally, they were both the same. I think one of the keys there is when you're running into something like that, whether it's when you're first starting out or you've gotten started and all of a sudden you realize, uh-oh, we have this missing piece. The first and foremost is identify what the missing piece is, and then start to talk about, okay, so what is it that we need to do to move to the next step, to move to that next level. And there's a lot of people who can give people feedback. You don't necessarily need to hire it, but it's identifying what are some of those steps, and does one of them have that capability to flex into that? Because again, we're all made up of all of it. You know, like with this, because, you know, I've got a really, really, really low on some things. You know, with bank, I tend to, you know, it's a different level, but you can nurture that other piece of it to grow and learn how to do that. And sometimes if you've got your own business, you've got a lot of people that are rooting for you, whether it's, you know, your parents or a friend from school, or, you know, just the person next door who's running their own company. You can find those resources, and that may be a way to help you flex that muscle. I mean, going out and working out, and the more you use it, the better you're going to get at it. So that may be another way to approach that, until you, like Rob said, get to that point where you're big enough that then you can hire it out.
Yeah, and it'll be a fun day to delegate then, won't it?
Exactly.
I can get that off my plate.
You take it. No, you take it.
Yeah. So anyway, we're kind of at our time here. And so I really, really want to thank the three of you for being here with me today and sharing all your insights and wisdom around this. And I know it changed the way we do our business here, and it's really helped us a lot. And I really thank everyone for attending this episode of Thrivecast. And I hope you enjoyed the conversation today. And if you have any follow-up questions or questions we weren't able to address due to the time limitations, please send them to us at info@consciousbranding.com, and we will respond to you. And then also we're starting to plan for our next round of episodes here in the coming months. And I'd like to hear your thoughts around some topics you'd like to have us kind of include. And you can send that to us at info@consciousbranding.com as well. That would be wonderful. And I look forward to seeing you all back here at our next episode next week. And remember, you create your world, so believe in your vision, drive it with purpose, and above all, take action. So until next time, we go out there and be remarkable. Have a great week.